Good morning, good afternoon, hello, welcome, or good evening, depending upon where you're joining us from. Thank you for joining us today. Hopefully we've got some interesting topics for you as we talk about the CIS Top 18 Critical Security Controls. Now, this is part one. As we'll see, there's 18 controls, so it's a little much that we can hit in one session today, but join us in the upcoming sessions for the rest of the top 18 as we go through them. So first of all, introduction to Secure IT 360 and myself, if this is your first time joining us, but Secure IT 360, we are a full service specialized cybersecurity and compliance consulting firm. We have offices that we're headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama, as well as Kansas City, Missouri. And we assist our clients with cybersecurity governance plans, compliance consulting. We were founded in 2009 by David Forrestal, our founder. And since then, we've seen consistent year-over-year growth. We're proud to be an independent vendor agnostic company, really, again, helping our clients develop and maintain their cybersecurity posture to increase the safety and security of their firm and the data that they hold. We empower our clients with the advice they need to improve and maintain. And it's really our job to know the things you don't know when it comes to cybersecurity compliance. It's our goal to uncover those internal issues that maybe most departments don't have because they don't have the knowledge or skill set, or maybe the time and availability just to discover what's out there. So our services are primarily in 4 areas. So that's going to be around assessment and penetration testing. We also do assessments around compliance and standards, including CIS that we're going to see today. We also have monitoring and incident response. That's our managed SOC services. And of course, we do forensic services. When you have those incidents, we can assist with discovering what happened and how to prevent it for the next time. For myself, my name is Daniel Perkins. I'm a Senior Information Security Officer here at Secure IT 360. I live near Denver, Colorado, and I've been with the firm since 2021. I've got certifications in CISSP, CISM, CISA, and CRISC. And just like a lot of us in this kind of first generation or first and a half generation of cybersecurity, started in IT, moved into IT management, and then shifted over to cybersecurity, information security around 2016. One of my first large projects was to get the company I was at certified to ISO 27001. And we did borrow some elements from CIS, as we'll see today. But today I serve our clients doing assessments, program development, and virtual CISO. And of course, today's topic of developing a program around CIS Top 18. So I'll have a good agenda, kind of sets the baseline for where we're going today. But first, we're going to start with an overview of CIS. Maybe you're not familiar with it, what it might be, how CIS was formed. Then we're going to take a look at the first 4 controls. We're going to start with the inventory of enterprise assets. We're going to look at the inventory of software assets. We're going to look at data protection and secure configuration. Our goal here today is really to help you get the foundational knowledge of CIS Top 18 to, again, improve that safety and security of your firm and the data that your firm holds. Some of what you hear today may be new, maybe something you've heard before, or maybe even something you're already doing, and that's okay. What we encourage you is to take what works for you out of our conversation today. There's no perfect plan, and we'll see that with CIS, and there's no perfect program, but hopefully you can take something that works for you. And again, a lot of these are recommendations. There's no mandate to follow any of these CIS controls, but we'll see how that shapes out as we go forward. All right, so first, CIS, that is the Center for Internet Security. They've got their controls here that they developed, and you can find it at the link there at cisecurity.org/controls. They're a nonprofit organization that's really a leader in developing baselines and programs for internet security, IT security. When we think about the top 18 controls, those were last updated in 2021, so fairly recently, not as stale or as behind as some standards, and that was updated to version 8. So these controls have been around for some time, and we've seen consistent growth and improvement over the years from the CIS Top 18. It is 18 control categories, and we'll take a look at what those are in the coming sessions. But they span a number of domains around asset management, which we're already going to talk about, account management and access control, access management. That's going to be some of the other domains that you'll see. Of course, vulnerability and pen testing, along with incident response, vendor management, and even the human element of awareness training. That's some of the domains that you have in the top 18 controls. A lot of these controls are community driven, right? CIS is a nonprofit organization, and they reach out and work and collaborate with the community to develop these controls, which means that these controls are used across multiple industries, right? These controls apply whether you're in critical infrastructure, you're in legal, you're in manufacturing, you're in social media. These controls can be mapped and applied across multiple industry verticals. So don't feel like if you're in one industry or vertical that, hey, these controls may not apply. You can absolutely take these, and we'll see how they can map to other standards as well. Now, no program and no control set is perfect by no means, and CIS does have some strengths and weaknesses. So let's take a look at some of what those are. First, one of the things that I like about CIS Top 18, it is very technically focused, right? When we look at some of the other standards, they can be organizational focused and we kind of miss some of the technical bits and bytes. But when we look at the CIS Top 18, they do at times get very technical and very detailed. The controls are grouped around those activities, right? We kind of saw that in the domains that I listed around access management, account management. So if you have a larger team, or maybe you've got an MSP, an IT partner, or a managed security partner like Security 360, you can delegate or assign some of these tasks based on the activity, based on what these controls do. So it does allow your teams to focus on the areas that are most important, the areas that they have expertise in, and shift the controls for other groups outside of to where they've got the expertise, right? And so we're not loading up teams with things maybe they don't quite understand or know what the best practice is. Along with the technical focus, these controls can be prescriptive at times. We'll see that when it comes to some of the controls that we have today around inventory management, where they specify certain elements that need to be in your inventory, or even certain update cycles where some other standards like ISO and NIST, they'll say, hey, you should do updates to your inventory management and make sure that you've got a good control. Whereas when we look at the CIS, it'll say, hey, you've got to do this at least biannually, or maybe you've got to do it monthly or weekly. So it does get prescriptive on the when and the what, and we'll see what some of those elements are as we go through. Another strength for CIS is the implementation groups. This allows you to be flexible in how you follow CIS. And there's 3 implementation groups, and we'll take a look at those in a moment. But they allow you to kind of stair-step your way into CIS as you get more mature, as you get a better handle on the first implementation group, then you can move to group 2 and group 3. Now, I will say this too, there's a couple that we'll talk about today that I feel like should be a lower group or maybe even a higher group. We'll talk about those today. But by no means do you have to be all-inclusive where we start with group 1 before we can move to group 2 and group 3. You can pick and choose as we go through. A strength and also weakness is the CIS Top 18 is attestation only, meaning when we think about like ISO 27001 or a SOC 2, there's a certification when it comes to ISO 27001. There's a SOC 2 report that we would get from a CPA firm that I can put in front of my clients and customers and say, hey, here's my report. I'm doing security well. I've got a third-party auditor. Now, certainly, Security 360, we can come in and assess how are you doing against the CIS Top 18. But it's only a report that you can self-attest to, right? Certainly, you can have a third party like us come in, but there's no certification or standard that you can follow that, hey, here's my certification to Top 18. It's going to be a self-attestation only. And, you know, yes, you can have a third party like us come in, but for a lot of clients, they're not going to accept if you just say to them, hey, I'm CIS Top 18 aligned. Okay, great, good, fantastic, but I still need an ISO 27001 or a SOC 2. Another area of weakness for the CIS Top 18 is it does lack some organizational policy. We will see some process stuff as we go through and procedure level, but we're going to be missing out on a lot of the policy level elements that we would get from a ISO or NIST. So it does lack that organizational level work, again, because we're focused on those technical prescriptive controls here. So it is going to lack some of that policy level work that maybe you need for your system and program. So keep that in mind that, hey, this does lack some of that organizational policy level stuff that I will need for a very robust security management. It also lacks a risk assessment approach, right? A lot of these controls, because they are prescriptive, because they are technical, it's harder for us to look at them and say, okay, based on a risk assessment for this control area, I don't know that you need to be doing this task weekly or monthly, but we're going to see where that's definitely prescribed in the CIS Top 18, where you need to do this activity at a certain cadence, or you need to have this minimum setting in your environment. So it does lack a little bit of that, hey, based on our risk assessment, I don't think we need to be doing this at this level. Maybe we can do it less frequently or at a lower security level. So it does lack that risk-based approach that we see with ISO and NIST and other standards, where a lot of the controls that we implement are risk-based based on our profile of our organization, where here it's pretty prescriptive and defined. It also does lack some flexibility, right? And that gets back to the risk assessment, where we've got very defined controls around how often and what we have to do. And so if I look at these controls, I may say, man, this doesn't make sense the way CIS is written. However, since there is no certification, it's a self-attestation only, we can still say, hey, we're aligned to CIS, but we've taken this control and we've scaled it back a little bit because it best fits our organization. But of course, then we have to say, hey, we're just aligned. We're not following all the CIS Top 18. It does lack coverage in certain areas, right? It does cover a lot of security domains, but like I said, it does lack that risk management approach where we're identifying, assessing, and treating risk. It also lacks controls for around privacy of the data that we hold. It lacks some controls around compliance, making sure that we're meeting our contractual requirements, our regulatory requirements. Now, that's not to say that you can and should use CIS to build towards that regulatory compliance, but it does lack some of the controls for assessing those compliance risks. Now, I said this does align to other standards, and absolutely it does. When you look at the CIS Top 18, there are mappings for SOC 2, NIST CSF, ISO 27001, and others. So where these controls do lack that technical prescriptive element, absolutely, we encourage and we work with our clients to say, hey, we're going to pull the CIS Top 18 critical control because it fits really well into this vulnerability management piece or into this password piece where we have to define how often we do things or technical elements of how we do passwords or network configuration or other elements, right? Even with NIST CSF, it goes a bit further. If you look at the Top 18, it has already tagged a lot of the controls, in fact, most of them, around the NIST CSF 1.1, around this identify, protect, detect, respond, and control, recover domains. So as you're looking through the control list, if you're aligned to NIST CSF or you're wondering, hey, Daniel, what do these identify and protect mean? That's the alignment back to NIST CSF that you're going to see directly in the document. Now, what I want to encourage you to is as you're looking at the mappings for these other control standards or security frameworks, you need to check the relationship. Some of them are equivalent, which means they match exactly to what ISO specifies or NIST specifies. Sometimes it's a subset, meaning the CIS Top 18 control hits most of the elements for ISO or NIST, but it does lack some of the elements that they want to see in these controls for NIST or ISO. And other times you're going to see where the control is superset of the Top 18 compared to the standard, meaning that CIS does actually more or has a broader encompassment of this control than NIST or ISO requires. So you can actually say, hey, I've got an A+ on this control, right? Where I'm doing above and beyond what's required because I'm following the CIS Top 18 over just what the standard says. So I mentioned the implementation groups, and so let's take a look at those. So when we think about implementation group 1, that's going to be at some level driven towards small enterprise, right? Where we have probably a limited IT, right? And maybe we have no security, maybe we got an MSSP like Security 360, but it's going to be driven with the elements of, hey, this is driven for small business. They have limited IT, they don't have a lot of resources. Now, that's certainly not to say if you're a large enterprise or medium enterprise, you shouldn't do implementation group 1. But understand that this is kind of the entry point, right? This is driven for small enterprises to get their security posture up. It's driven towards protecting and defending against general attacks, right? Where we're thinking about social engineering, non-targeted attacks, non-spear phishing. So it's going to help you get that foundational element to stop those general attacks. A lot of what we see in implementation group 1 relies on COTS, or commercial off the shelf, right? Where we've got consumer, prosumer, small business, grade software systems, applications, where we're not looking at enterprise level applications, and maybe we've got only 1 or 2 business verticals, right? Maybe we only do one thing in our company. Maybe we're just manufacturing one widget, right? We don't have any other elements. Maybe we're just selling to consumers, just a law firm with one practice area or something. So it's driven towards that smaller enterprise where we're using just commercial off-the-shelf things. Often too, what we're expected with this implementation group 1 is to have that low sensitivity data, right? Maybe it's just employee records. Maybe it's just financials for my company. Low sensitivity data certainly can be confidential and non-public, but we're focused on things that if this data gets breached or compromised, it's not going to hurt the public welfare. Certainly it's going to hurt our reputation and it's going to be bad, but we're not looking at significant loss of control to consumer data or critical infrastructure. And when we think about the CIA triad, right? That's going to come up a lot here as we see that when we think about the CIA of confidentiality, integrity, availability, when we think about implementation group 1, we're focused here on the availability part of the CIA triad. So when we think about our data security at the center, we want to keep our data safe and secure. In this group 1, we're focused on the availability elements mostly, right? There are some integrity and confidentiality, but for group 1, we're really focused on that availability part of the CIA triad. Now, when we think about implementation group 1, generally, we're thinking about more medium-sized enterprises, more medium-sized businesses, not exclusive, but that's generally where we're going to start seeing these controls be best applied. Here, we've definitely got an IT shop, right? And maybe we even have a small security element, or maybe we're outsourcing our security, but we probably at this point definitely have internal IT. Maybe we're still leveraging an MSP for certain parts of our IT infrastructure, but definitely we've got a good foundation of IT and maybe even some small security elements. Here, operational complexity is increasing, right? Where we've got potentially multiple lines of software, multiple lines of business in our environment. And we may even have some enterprise software. Maybe our ERP is an enterprise system. Maybe our document management, maybe that's enterprise class software. But we're moving away from kind of this prosumer, small business level software to something more enterprise. And certainly with that comes more regulatory and compliance control, right? Definitely we've got a loss of confidence in the consumer if our data gets breached, right? Maybe we've got some a large number of consumer records. Maybe we're holding confidential data for our clients and our customers. So the complexity is increasing because maybe now we also have multiple lines of business. Maybe we're manufacturing something and we're also selling it through our e-commerce shop, or maybe we're also selling our product through Amazon or Walmart or some other supplier or consumer. Maybe we're doing law firm in multiple states or multiple countries. Maybe we are, selling the data that we've got to other entities. So now we've definitely got more complexity. We've got more regulatory compliance. And so now we dip into that confidentiality part of the triad, right? In group 1, we were focused on availability. Here in group 2, we're starting to focus on the confidentiality of the data we've got, meaning that I'm protecting the data I have from any unauthorized access, unauthorized disclosure, that I've got the data that has been entrusted to me by my clients and consumers, that I'm doing my due diligence to make sure that data is safe and secure. Now, when we look at implementation group 3, this is going to be largely focused, and a lot of the controls are going to be applied best for large enterprises, right? And again, this is not exclusive, right? You can choose to pick these controls out of group 1, 2, and 3 and say, yeah, I'm going to pick a group 3 control. And I'm even going to recommend that for some of the ones you're going to see today, where we say, yeah, I know this is group 3 and this is focused on large enterprise, but I think we can do this at the size that we are, and it makes sense for our environment. So At this point now, you likely have a large IT contingent, and you probably at this point have some in-house security. Again, maybe you're still leveraging some outside partners for parts of your information security or parts of your IT, but at this point, you definitely have your own IT department. Here we're focused on preventing and deterring those targeted attacks, right? So now we're getting into specific elements, maybe even state level actors, certainly spear phishing, targeted attacks. Those are going to be the things that we can defend against here in Group 3, where we're really looking at identifying and keeping those attackers out of our environment. Maybe they've already gotten in, but now we're going to be able to detect them and monitor them and get them out of our environment. Certainly at this point, we've got enterprise software too, where nearly every application we've got is enterprise level. Of course, we have commercial off-the-shelf software. Nobody can get away from Office and Adobe, right? We still got those in our environment, but now we've got multiple lines of enterprise software between our financial system, our document management, our hosting platform, infrastructure. We're definitely in the enterprise space at this point, most likely. And of course, now the regulatory compliance continues. And at this point, some of the data we got maybe even affect public welfare, right? Potentially, we're in critical infrastructure. We're providing critical services to the public. So the regulatory compliance has definitely ramped up because we've got these clients, we've got large data sets, we've definitely got confidential, non-public data at this point. And so now we bring into that integrity part of the CIA triad, right? So now we've got all three elements where when we think about integrity, we're thinking to make sure that the data we've got is not modified in an unauthorized way, that the data is secure and trusted. The data we've got, we know it's validated. We're doing those data checks against this. So again, while these groups are focused as we go through for increasing size of enterprise, don't feel like you're locked in. If you see a control in Group 3 that really resonates, or you feel like will protect the data you've got, provide that trust to your clients and consumers and customers, go ahead and grab it. There's no mandate that says, well, you can't do Group 3 till you get past Group 1, right? Absolutely, you're able to pick and choose from these controls and the different implementation groups, but it does build on each other in a lot of cases. So in some cases, you can't grab a Group 2 control till you've accomplished that Group 1 control. All right, so let's look at Control 1. So this is the inventory and control of enterprise assets. So we're thinking about IT assets here, right? So what are the IT assets that are in scope for this enterprise asset? Well, first we've got end user devices, right? That could be laptops, desktops, tablets, mobile devices, anything that my end users are using to access the information I've got, process data on our customers' behalf, build whatever we're building, providing those services to our customers, that's going to be those end user devices. Next, of course, we've got network devices, right? Everything is connected these days by some sort of network connectivity, whether it be wireless, whether it be traditional, hardwired switchgear, routers, firewalls. All those elements are going to be part of those network devices. Like I said, including that wireless access stuff, that's got to be encompassed in your network devices. IoT devices, right? A lot of what we're seeing, we've got IoT everywhere, whether it be storage, whether it be cameras, whether it be thermostats, whatever you've got IoT that's talking back to the internet, certainly that needs to be encompassed here. This could also be where we don't want to ignore any operational devices, right? Where we've got manufacturing. Well, it may not be IoT because they're connected back to the internet. Certainly, we want to make sure that we're capturing those non-traditional end user or network devices as part of our IoT. Next, we've got infrastructure, right? All this runs off servers. Maybe I've got some network connected storage. Maybe I've got some hyper-converged platforms, whatever it might be. If you've got traditional pizza boxes, right, of servers, that's going to fall under this infrastructure. And last but not least, we've got to capture what we have out in the cloud, right? We can't just throw a server up in AWS or Azure and say, hey, we're good. It's up in the cloud, so it's protected. We've got to maintain that inventory of control, whether it's on the traditional on-premise or whether it's out in the cloud from a infrastructure as a service partner. So let's look at some of the control elements in Group 1. We're going to spend a little bit of time here because this is foundational and it's going to build on the other controls as we look at them. So first, we need to establish an inventory. This can be done in a couple of different ways, depending upon who we're working with and what you already have. One of the ways you can manage your inventory is just through your device management tools, right? Maybe you've got an MDM tool. Maybe you've got a tool that's managing all your laptops in your environment, right? That's absolutely one of the tools you can use to manage your inventory. If you don't have that, maybe you're a small shop. Hey, spreadsheets are the way. Spreadsheets rule the world. They're the #1 reporting tool in the world, right? I don't care who you are, what size business, you're going to have some spreadsheets. And that's a great foundational way to understand what you've got in your environment, what should be there, what should not. And then so, yeah, maybe some additional manual work on your half as you bring assets in and out that you've got to go update your spreadsheets. But it is a foundational way to achieve this inventory control. Another way that we work, and I've done this too in the past, is I've got various management consoles, right? Maybe I've got a console for my hyperconverged platform. Maybe I've got a console for Intune or something, right? Where I'm managing all these devices. Absolutely, you can use that as your inventory control. That keeps me from having to manage a separate database. As you get more complex, that may not be enough to satisfy some of your requirements that you have, but certainly it's an entry-level point to say, yeah, all my inventory is tracked and measured in this management console. Now here we're going to see the first of that prescriptive element that I talked about of, hey, we've got to do these things on a set schedule. So here we've got a biannual update requirement, right? When we look at this control, it does specify you can't just do this once a year or whenever you think about it or as needed. You've got to do it at least biannually. And I would even encourage you for maybe some of your more critical assets or things that are moving around a lot, maybe you need to do it more often than biannually. All right, come on, slide. There we go. So the other part of this is we want to look for unauthorized devices, right? And there's a couple different ways we can do that. One of the ways we can do that is through a traditional network scan. Maybe we run an Nmap on our environment. We just scan our environment, wide open, see what's out there, look for things that are unauthorized, unexpected. Maybe I've got a VLAN that's static IP only. And so I know the first 50 are reserved. If I see anything after 51, or 51 or higher, that is an unauthorized device. Another way we can detect those unauthorized devices is through our SIM, right? As we see connections being made, that can absolutely be a trigger to say, hey, this device is unauthorized. It's coming in from an unexpected port, unexpected network address, those things that are unauthorized outside what we expect. So the message here is really we're focused on know what you have and know what should not be there. So that's the message that we want to get through with this first control one. We want to know what we have in our environment, know what's expected, and then know what should not be there, what's unexpected in our environment. So we're going to see how that maps out through the rest of these in group 2. Now, in group 2, now we're moving into active discovery, right? When we looked at group 1 versus group 2, we're kind of moving up in our types of software that we have, maybe the size of business as well. So at this point now, we need to be thinking about active discovery of our devices in our environment to know what we have and know what should not be there. So we may be utilizing an agent, right? Maybe our MDM platform, whatever we have for device management, maybe that's got an agent that we're going to drop on our devices, and that's going to give me data back. That needs to be updating our management tools, right? So we need to be making sure that the inventory we've got is accurate and complete. We're getting those daily inventory updates to our agents, right? As we onboard a new device, it gets that agent dropped in, and that's updating our management tools, and it's doing it on a daily basis because it's automatic, right? At this point, it's an active discovery. Another element that we need to be thinking about here with group 2 is DHCP logging. This allows you to capture those non-agent devices, right? Just because you have Intune out there, there's a lot of devices you can't drop it on. Certainly a lot of switchgear cannot handle an agent. Maybe we've got some of those IoT devices, right? So if we start monitoring our DHCP, looking at what's requesting an address, what's being served an address, that's going to allow us to capture those non-agent based devices. Again, here we see a weekly update cadence, right? Where we've got, if we're doing the DHCP logging in this inventory control of assets, knowing what we have, knowing what should not be there, we need to be looking at this weekly. Now, this could be one area where hey, Daniel, I get it. I just don't have the resources to do a weekly review of DHCP logging. But think about the first control. One of the things that we looked at with the passive discovery was looking at SIM logs. So maybe you set up a report out of your SIM that gives you a weekly update of here's all the DHCP addresses. And you can use that to start looking for anomalies, looking for that what should not be there, those unauthorized devices. So while it does say weekly updates, think about ways you can automate this reporting. So you're not having to do that manual data pull, doing that manual update to a spreadsheet. There's definitely ways to automate these controls. So don't feel like it's got to be hands-on keyboard for all of these. You can absolutely set up a report that drops in your inbox. You take a look at it and say, yep, that looks satisfactory, nothing unusual, nothing unauthorized. I'm good to go. No further updates required. All right, so the next one here, when we think about passive discovery, this is group 3. So now we're thinking about things that are definitely enterprise class. We're looking for those targeted attacks in group 3, right? So here we're thinking about passive discovery. What we're looking for here, what we're trying to defend against in this group, in this control, is we're really trying to defend against that man-in-the-middle attack. This will absolutely require some enterprise-level network tool. And here we want to look for weekly updates. Now, what does this look like? Traditionally, what you're going to be looking for here is you're going to want to span your network port to identify what's listening between devices. When we think about a man in the middle, what we're after is there's something or someone listening to what's talking between my client device and my server. I've got that man in the middle who's listening and observing everything. So when we span that port, we can start to see where that data is flowing. And if we can look for that unusual or unsuspected, knowing what should not be there, right? That's what we're looking for here with this group 3. So this one here is definitely, I would say, going to be that enterprise level. You've got to have the right network tools. You've got to have the expertise to implement this passive discovery element. Certainly group 1 and group 2, you're going to need to have accomplished in this case before you move to this passive discovery. But if you're in an environment where you have a high probability, or maybe you've definitely got to be able to have protections against this man-in-the-middle attack, looking for that client-server interception, this is going to be the way to defend against that and looking for that man-in-the-middle attack. All right, so let's now take a look at control 2. So here in control 2, we're after the inventory and control of software assets. So what's a software asset, Daniel? Well, certainly the first one is operating systems, right? All of our end user devices are going to run on some flavor of Windows, Linux, or Mac OS, right? So that's going to be one of the software assets that we've got to capture. I'm sure there's somebody who runs on some fourth platform, but everybody we work with is one of those 3 flavors of Linux, Mac, or Windows. Absolutely, applications. So these are going to be the more off-the-shelf stuff. So your Adobe's, your Chrome, your Office suite, these are going to be the applications that we're going to want to have good inventory and control over. Enterprise software, right? So this is going to be the larger software sets, like maybe my document management system, maybe my financial system, maybe something like SharePoint, something that's more enterprise grade, has a lot of features and functionality. Maybe it's definitely got a lot of critical data for my organization. And again, we cannot forget cloud here, right? We've got to capture those cloud assets. Just because it's not hosted in my environment doesn't mean I don't have to consider it and make it part of my management platform and management of the software I have. Certainly, a lot of the cloud software as a service that we see, it is absolutely holding some very critical data and very sensitive data for my organization. So I need to understand what I have out there, what's expected of it, what type of data in that, and we'll see how that maps out as we go through. So software assets here, again, from the OS level up, even with the OS level, we need to think about those switch gears, right? My firewalls, my routers, my wireless access system, even camera systems, right? Those need to be captured as part of my operating system and my applications, making sure I know what's out there and what I have. All right, so let's take a look at group 1. What do we have to do with group 1 here in control 2? First, pretty straightforward. Just like we saw with the IT assets, we need to establish that inventory. Now, this is where we get a little prescriptive, right? I want to capture the specific versions I'm expected to have in my environment. I want to make sure that I know what's out there, that I've got that specific version. I also need to map my software to a specific business purpose or business owner, right? Hopefully we're not bringing in software to environment just because it looks flashy and fun. Hopefully we're bringing things in because they feel a specific purpose or operational requirement for our business, right? And so we need to map that back. I can't tell you how many times I've been in an environment. We've done a scan to see what's in the environment for a vulnerability. Some odd or random unexpected piece of software will pop up and I'll say, hey, what's this software about? Why do you guys have this? It doesn't make sense for what your organization does, what your firm does. Oh, yeah, we don't even know, right? And so if we don't know why it came in, we can't go to talk to somebody with that business purpose or business owner to say, hey, why did we bring this software in the first place? Sometimes it's a client requirement, right? Maybe the client says, hey, you've got to interact with us on this platform, this tool, this software. So there is definitely a business requirement. Other times it's a little bit more loose, and so we're going to try to pull that out. We don't have to protect what we don't have. Next is the license type, right? Some of the software that we work with is free. It's open source. There's no license requirement, no worries about commercial use for this software. Others, maybe I buy a license for 50. So if I hit that 51st person that's going to use this software, I'm going to be against the intellectual property rights of that software, right? They've only licensed me for 50, so I cannot use 51. Sometimes that's a hard cutoff, right? Where the software will absolutely not allow you to use that 51st. Other times it's a loose license agreement, so you can use that 51. You're going to true up at the end of the year, but certainly we have to respect the rights of the suppliers that we're buying the software from. And we also need to understand, again, going back to that business purpose, do we really need that 51st license because we got to pay for it? Or yeah, maybe we don't. We can move a license from somebody else. Now here we see that prescriptive control, right? We want that biannual update to our inventory. We can't just be looking at this once in a blue moon, once every 4 years. We've got to have a good cadence, a good habit of looking at this. I see these where it says biannual updates, and I often get a little pushback. Dana, we just don't have time. Maybe, but you should. And what I would also encourage you is the first few times are going to be rough. They're going to be messy. It's going to take, what should take maybe an hour is going to take 4, right? But as you get into the cadence, as you do this more often, that 4 hours is going to shrink. It's going to go down to an hour. And as you do it, maybe you're also going to find ways you can automate this, right? And say, hey, I've got a report that I can spit out. That's going to give me a lot of the information I need. And that takes my time to do this update, do this inventory update from hours to maybe minutes or half hour, right? So yeah, it's going to be messy. It's going to take a while the first few times you do these processes for these updates. But as you get the rhythm, as you understand what you got to do, you're going to find those efficiencies. It's going to become more of a habit. And so you're going to see those times drop as you move. All right, another element that we want to capture in our inventory is current support, right? Again, I can't tell you how many environments I've been in where we've got some old OS, some old application, and I'm sure everybody's nodding their head. Yeah, Daniel, I've got one of those too in my environment. There's going to be times where there's a business requirement. We've got to keep this old server, this old application, old database, whatever it is in our environment because it fills a specific purpose. But we need to document that exception. And we need to make sure that we've got a good justification to keep that in our environment. And this is a monthly review cycle. And what this will hopefully trigger is as you go back to that business owner and say, hey, we've got this unsupported software. It's costing me a lot of time and effort and management to protect it. There's no updates for it. We're definitely at risk. Can I shut this thing down already, right? Can we get this out of our environment? Can we move the data to a more supportive platform? Hopefully it's going to trigger that. And you're going to get that, the wheels will get greased and you'll get that out of your environment, right? You'll get that pesky server out of there and you're going to get a better secure environment. Last piece here, when we look at group 1, what we've got to do here is we've got to look for unauthorized software. So again, this is getting back to knowing what we have, knowing what should not be there, like we saw with group 1, right? We need to identify and remove that unauthorized software. Things that are getting installed from click-throughs. Hopefully you've got good administrative control. Maybe people aren't installing things, but there's always stuff that gets in somehow, some way. Maybe there's shadow IT happening in your environment, right? Think about cloud, right? Somebody can go buy a cloud software solution. It's not going to show up on anything internally because it's a cloud solution. There's nothing for me to scan internally to find it. That's definitely a way we want to identify those. Fortunately, one of the ways that we identify those is just looking at where our money's going, right? We look at the vendors that we're sending our money to. That's a good foundational way to say, hey, where's our money going? What vendors are we working with? That's one of the ways we can find that shadow IT, that cloud software that we didn't know we had. All right, so let's look at some of the elements of group 2. And again, we're after knowing what we have and knowing what should not be there. Similar to what we saw with the IT assets, right? We're going to look at that automated discovery. So we want to try to discover all the software in our environment. One of the ways we can do that is through our management tools, right? That we already have established in group 1. A lot of these tools will tell me what the OS is, what applications are installed, what the versions of the applications are. That's going to be one of the ways I can get that automated information out. Now, if you've already got MDM and you're thinking about it, hey, you're pretty much all the way to group 2 with this control, right? So there may not be a lot for you to do to hit group 2 here. Another way that we find these software, knowing what should be there and what should not be there, is maybe through a vulnerability scan, right? If we run in our environment a good authenticated scan, we're going to capture all that software that's installed on our devices, right? Particularly if we can get down to some of those non-traditional, or not non-traditional, but non-Windows or non-Mac OS devices where we've got switchgear. If we can run an authenticated scan on those too, that's fantastic, because now I have my operating version. I know what firmware it's at, so I can get all that data that I need to understand what we have and what should not be there. Maybe I've got an older switch that's running on an OS I don't want it on, and I've got to get it updated. The next group here is around allowed software and libraries. So now we're moving from what we have and what should not be there. We're actually putting technical controls in to keep the stuff that we should not be there out. So application control, here we're thinking about allow list and block list, right? Where we're saying, here's the software that we allow in our environment. If it's not on this list, it will get blocked. The user cannot install it. Again, we're talking about biannual updates with this allowed software and libraries. Libraries, we're thinking about, hey, those dependencies for this enterprise software to run in a lot of cases, right? Maybe I've got to have a certain version of Java. Maybe I've got to have a certain version of Perl or PHP or something. Those libraries that they're not directly the software that's running, but it's a dependency for the software I have in my environment. We see this a lot with Log4j a while back, right? Nobody knew what it was, but it's one of those libraries that's used to run a ton of software in the world, right? And so that's one of those libraries that we need to think about, that type of software that's, I'm not using Log4j directly, but it's a dependency for my software that I'm running. It's one of those dependent libraries. And so I've got to capture it in my inventory control, make sure I've got allowed versions out there only. All right, and group 3. Here we're even getting a step further with past software and libraries down to the script level, right? Now, certainly here we want to make sure we've got good digital signatures of our script, especially if I'm developing my scripts internally. I want to make sure I've got good version control around those, right? If you're developing scripts in your environment, you're almost constantly updating them, I guarantee it. And so we need to make sure that the versions that we want out there are published and available, and anything that needs to be deprecated, pulled out, we've got that version control to pull it out. Again, here we want to see good script control where we've got unauthorized scripts blocked and we're only allowing the things that we want to run in the environment. And again, here we're looking at biannual reviews. So certainly this is one where if you're not running scripts in your environment, you can achieve group 3 here by just blocking all scripts in your environment. That may not apply. You've got to be pretty heavy in cloud to be able to achieve that, blocking scripts. But it is a possibility that you could, jump all the way to group 3 here and achieve this control by just blocking all scripts, because all scripts are unauthorized in your environment. All right, so let's take a look at our next one here, control 3 around data protection. Here we're focused on data assets. First group, we were looking at IT assets, and then we were looking at software assets, but now we're looking at data assets. Here we need to identify the data we've got. We need to classify it, give it some sort of criticality or sensitivity to our environment. We look at how we're going to handle the data, how we collect it, how we store it, how we process it, how we transfer it in our environment. We need to look at retention schedules. If you're a law firm, it's really hard to get rid of data, but it's still important to understand how we can keep the data we've got for as long as we need it, but not past when we need it. And we need to think about the secure disposal of the data we've got. Once it's time to get it out of our environment, how do we do it in a safe and secure manner? So, data protection group one. First, we need to have a data management process. Dana, what the heck is a data management process? Well, we're going to see that that's going to be basically the process for implementing all the controls that are in group one, group two, and group three. It's going to be that foundational process and procedures for doing all the data control elements that we've got. So classification, access control, retention, disposal, all the controls are going to follow. This is the top level data management process where we identify everything in our environment. We start to inventory it, right? Now, for both the data management process and our data inventory, we need to be doing at least annual updates. If you're collecting a ton of data from a large number of clients, maybe you need to do it more often than annually to understand what's out there. And again, automate it. You don't have to rely on a manual process for your inventory updates. The next control that we need to think about is access control, right? Some of the data we have is sensitive to ourselves or sensitive to the clients and customers we serve. So if we need to protect that data based on their requirements, we need to identify what those critical data are and determine who can access it, who's got that authorized access. You know, one of the things when we look at breach cases, breach incidents, regulatory compliance is it's unauthorized access. Doesn't necessarily mean a breach. We can still have unauthorized access just inside our own organization. So consider that when you think about access control. If you've got a client who's got very specific requirements, this is where access control is going to come into this group one. Next, data retention. We don't need to keep all the data we've got forever and ever, right? Certainly, there's going to be regulatory contractual requirements where we have to keep data for a certain time period. Traditionally, financial data is about 7 years here in the US. Other data may have a shorter lifespan. Some data may be kept in perpetuity. We've got to keep it forever, right? But we need to start identifying what those retention schedules are. And that leads us to our next one of data disposal. So as we identify data that needs to be removed from our environment, taken out of our control, we need to develop safe and secure methods for the disposal of that follows the sensitivity and criticality of that data, right? That we're taking the steps to digitally erase it, whether that be just a basic deletion, maybe it be a wipe. Certainly as we're pulling hard drives out of our environment, that we're doing some sort of wipe procedure on them before they go out, maybe even a physical destruction. And the last point is around device encryption, right? So that's going to be making sure that our mobile devices, our laptops, maybe even our storage environment, that they've got the encryption they need. Again, mapping back to the data inventory, the data management process to know the criticality of the sensitivity, right? Not all data needs to be encrypted to the same level. So there may be a chance that we've got some data that's more protected than others. Maybe we've got low criticality data in an unencrypted format, but we've got high critical data, high sensitivity data in an encrypted format. So here we're focused on knowing what we have again, and we want to know how to use it, right? That's getting back to that criticality of the data we've got. What is my client requirements? What are the regulatory requirements? How can I use the data I've got? How do I enable my users to work with it, right? We're not here just to control the data. We're here so we can use the data to serve our clients, serve our consumers, serve our customers. So we need to make sure we're enabling the data we've got for the benefit of our clients and customers, but we're also protecting it in a way that they expect us because they're entrusting us with their data. Let's look at some of the group 2 controls. All right, here, classification. Like I said, some data is more critical than others. So we need to start developing classification schedules, right? So certainly if you've got confidential data, we want to be able to make sure we identify that and handle it maybe with additional controls. Maybe we've got different requirements on how we use that data based on the classification. Another element here in group 2, this is one where we see a lot of folks struggle with, is around data flows, knowing what's moving between application to application. In group 2, you're probably a medium to large enterprise, so you probably have some integration between a database and some sort of application. We need to understand how that data flows. Maybe you're even sending data out to the cloud, or you're ingesting data from a cloud service. We need to understand what those data flows are, what's going to what system, what's coming back. Again, knowing what we have, right? Knowing what we're expected to see in that data flow. Removable media comes in group 2 here, where we want to make sure we're controlling. We've got good visibility into what's going into any removable storage, flash drives, removable hard drives, whatever, that we know what's going to that we're providing the control structure around what can be written to those removable media, as well as encryption of those removable media based on the sensitivity or criticality. Public data probably doesn't need to be encrypted, but certainly if you've got client confidential data, we want to make sure it's protected with encryption. Next, we want to encrypt data in transit here in group 2, right? So now we're looking at, hey, anytime my data is moving around my environment based on the classification, it may need to be encrypted. And certainly what follows with that too is data at rest, right? Anytime we're writing this data to a storage environment, we want to make sure it's encrypted, whether it be removable or something more fixed like a SAN or NAS. We've got that data encrypted based on the classification. Now, data segmentation, this one is in group 2, and what this speaks to is that you've got a process to you've got a procedure to process sensitive data on assets that have that same sensitive criticality rating, meaning we're not processing sensitive data on assets with a lower sensitivity rating. So this one is one where I would say, I don't know that you need to take this in group 2. I would say there's a couple in group 3 we're going to see. I would take the group 3 controls before I take this in a lot of environments. Now, maybe in your environment, that is absolutely critical, that you've got sensitive data. You can only process it on machines that are segmented. They've got additional firewalls, maybe even air gaps around them. But this is one that I would say, if you're maybe not dealing with very critical data, I would skip this one and let's move to the group 3 controls. All right, so what are the group 3 controls that I feel like maybe should come a little ahead? First, DLP, data loss prevention. A lot of the modern email cloud-based services we've got today, they have some sort of fundamental or foundational DLP. I would encourage you, take that before you start segmenting your machines out for air gapping to do sensitive operations. A lot of the data loss that we see comes through email. So putting DLP on your email, it's a quick win, and you can do it pretty easily foundationally with a lot of the modern cloud-based email systems. Another one is logging sensitive data access. This one we can do with a lot of the modern DMS tools, maybe even SharePoint, certainly with network folders as well. If we've got a SIM, we can log that sensitive data access. This is one that can give me a little bit more visibility before I need to start air gapping my machines as well. So again, when we think about the implementation groups, there's no mandate requirement that we take all of group 1 and group 2 before we move to group 3. You can pick and choose, maybe even only take a few out of group 1 and we're going to jump to group 2 or group 3. So, but this is one where I would say, hey, data segmentation, processing applications and data that we've got on sensitive machines. Yes, it's important, but I would encourage you, turn on DLP. You've probably already got it. Maybe you've got to upgrade your license one level. But that's going to give you a little bit more protection over the data you've got, making sure it's not shared in an unauthorized fashion. All right, so let's take a look at control 4. So this is around the configuration of that enterprise assets and software that I've already identified in control 1 and control 2, and it even dips in a little bit of control 3. But certainly here, we want to protect our end user devices, right? We want to protect our network devices, all that connectivity that's connecting all my devices. Certainly our IoT, right? You can see how this is building on the stuff that we saw in group 1 and group 2, or control 1 and control 2 rather, where we're basically capturing everything that we've identified, and we're going to start making sure we're securing that data, we're securing those assets, getting all that software to a place that we feel like is doing exactly what we expect. So in group 1, what are some of the control elements? Well, first, we need a secure configuration process, right? And we need to do this update to these processes annually. One of the best ways you can do this is actually to leverage some of the CIS standard baselines, right? They have a ton of published baseline standards where you can secure and harden. It's effectively what we're talking about here is hardening our devices, pulled from CIS. Nearly every environment I've been in, there's some sort of baseline hardline configuration from CIS that I can leverage. Next, network devices, secure configuration. Again, use the CIS baselines. You don't have to invent a process from scratch here. And we're looking again for that annual update cycle, that our process and procedure, we're doing an annual update on that. We're not just looking at it every once in a while. Session lock. This is one where we get very prescriptive again, right? Where we don't have to make up a session lock period like we do in some other standards. For CIS, we're looking at a 15-minute session lock and a 2-minute session for mobile. Now, certainly this is one where you could say, yeah, that's fine, Daniel, or no, I can't do that. My users would revolt with their pitchforks for a 15-minute timeout or 2 minutes on a mobile. But get whatever you can get. And if anybody asks, just say, hey, well, CIS, this is a community founded or community organization. They say 15 minutes is best, right? So you've got a standard to fall behind here if somebody asks you why 15 minutes. Next, we want to think about firewalls on servers, right? And this needs to be at the port level. And certainly we want to turn on firewalls on end user devices as well. That's going to be part of this group 1 control standard. And we need to get down to the port level. We can't just, we need to be making sure, especially on servers, that we're only allowing the ports we want to communicate. Others are closed off. Next, we want to get into secure management. So this is going to be as we're managing these infrastructure devices, the network devices that we're maybe putting them on a segmented VLAN. Certainly, we're putting HTTPS on these or SSH. We're disabling HTTP or Telnet. Maybe even we're looking at MFA on our access to these management consoles. So this is going to be your console access for any switch gear, networking gear, maybe your HP ILO or ID rack, those management interfaces. We want to make sure those are protected, they're encrypted communications, and maybe they're on a separate VLAN and have MFA. Finally, we want to turn off those default accounts, right? Every system comes with some sort of default admin and password combination. We want to make sure we disable those or change them. Maybe even if it's appropriate, go and remove them from those devices. But at minimum, we want to change that default password and maybe even default username. So here, we're focused on a couple of things of knowing how it should be, knowing what I expect my devices to look like in the environment, and then knowing what needs action, right? Is when I identify those devices that don't match my baseline, my configuration I've defined, I know those devices need some sort of action. All right, so group 2, what do we got here? Again, we're looking at knowing how it should be and knowing what needs action. We're going to uninstall and disable any of those unnecessary services here when we hit control group 2. If I don't need that service, go ahead and turn it off, disable it. If I don't need that library, get it out of there. We want to make sure we're configuring trusted DNS. Honestly, I might move this one down to group 1. I think, especially as we're moving more into cloud-based services, having that trusted DNS, knowing that my users are getting the authentic DNS record I expect them to get, you might want to consider moving this control down to group 1, taking that before you look at some of the other group 2 controls, especially with the so much cloud software as a service out there. Next, we want to enforce our lockout, right? This is after a user has failed their username and password combination. I want to lock them out of their account after 10 attempts. And this should be extended to those cloud applications, not just what I have on premise. Want to enforce that remote wipe capability, especially on my mobile devices. If I hit that password lockout period, I'm going to enforce that remote wipe, and my users are going to have to come back to get their data. Or if that device is actually lost or stolen, my data is protected. Group 3, I'm picking up speed here because we're running out of time. I want to respect your schedules. So in group 3, here we're looking at separate workspaces, right? Especially on mobile devices. Maybe I've containerized my firm's data into my app that I control. I'm not allowing users to use those integrated mail and calendar apps. We want to separate that enterprise data, mostly around those mobile device workspaces. Probably at this point too, if you're looking at this control, you're issuing your users devices, and we don't have a lot of BYOD by the time we're getting to this, but maybe we've got it for mobile devices, and we want to containerize that data. All right, so that wraps us up for today. So what did we look at today? We did a quick overview of CIS, how it works, where it works best, maybe some of the gaps and weaknesses it got. We looked at control 1, control 2, 3, and 4 around the inventory of enterprise assets, inventory of software assets, data protection, and secure configuration. I hope this was beneficial. I hope you have a better understanding of how CIS works, how it can be used in your environment. But with that, I'm going to close this out and stick around for any questions anybody has.